So, this is a short history of female teachers in the United States. And this is something we need to talk about at the get go. I believe that we see that women dominate as classroom teachers currently, but we really haven't talked much about the gender equity aspect of teacher education or the devaluation of females that teach, that anyone can do it. Yes, you're just a babysitter. We haven't looked at the blindness regarding gender and racial bias in schools from a social, economic, and political standpoint. So there's a lot to be said about the misrepresentation of school teachers, really. If we look at some of the stats that are out there, 76% of public school teachers are women, but only 16% are women of color. So we've got principals going up into 54% of them being women, but only 18% of school principals, public school principals, are women of color. We see 33% of public school superintendents are women, and only 11% of public school superintendents are women of color. We're looking at the fact that 40% of schools have no teachers of color. So when we talk about representation, we talk about reflecting our society. What's up with all of that, right? What's up with that? And I contend that, well, not only me, but there is a contention that it happened in a very specific way. That when schools started out, kind of the idea of a non-private school starting out, white men were teachers. They were the teachers because they were teaching white boys. Girls of any color were not allowed in schools, and boys of color were not allowed in school. So they wanted the perfect the perfect male role model, and that would have been the white man, and because they are the ones that would be robust and firm and just knowing how to really keep the whole thing masculine, right? So that was the beginning of teaching. But then what happens? We have the whole big industrial age coming around, which we've talked about in this class. And so men beat it out of the teaching field and found higher ground, more money, ability to move up to higher ranks. And so what happened is it's kind of similar to the whole Rosie the Riveter thing, right? Is that we first thought that white men could be the only role models, especially for our white boys. But when they were no longer available, we decided, kind of did a big turnaround and thought, oh yeah, women are more caring, they nurturing. They should be the ones that are teaching in the classroom because they'll just be the gentle, kind teachers, right? So that's what we got. So this was an interesting thing, the idea that really women were the ones who should appropriately teach children. And that's where we got the whole idea that it was just natural. They were natural teachers because they're caregivers, they have babies and blah, blah. So really, that was a big turnaround. Men were supposedly the stalwart role models until they had a better thing going. So in the 1850s, what happened was that the majority of the teachers in the U.S. were women because they would take the jobs, right? So that was considered the feminization of the teaching profession. So what happens with that? Like a lot of the other mostly female professions like nursing and social work and all of that, women's work kind of got folded into their occupational work as well as their domestic house or home work, right? In the home work. And so they got kind of messed around with in terms of wages, in terms of power, in terms of advancement. And again, now the beginning of the end, remember how I say it was the plow for women, right? That they once the plow came around, that they assumed that everything was going to be delineated in terms of who had power, and the idea of women in the home, of women as domesticated individuals, just kind of went on from there, right? In the whole public sphere, we kind of went over this thing, but I think how it applies to teachers is we've got the plow, and we got the public sphere and the private sphere. We got the caretaking occupations. That's like 3 strikes there, right? And so we've got now teachers as women only, and they're kind of part of that whole domesticated, caretaking, nurturing sort of a extension of what women should do as work, not separating it from their natural abilities. So that's 3 strikes, you're out. Boom, because here's a fabulous quote. God seems to have made women peculiarly, why am I not being able to pronounce things? Particularly is how I want to say it, suited to guide and develop the infant mind. And it seems a very poor policy to pay a man $20 or $22 a month when, come on, what the heck? Women can teach children the ABCs for like barely a pittance, a third of the price. And so more bang for your buck, right? Because women can do it so much better and with so much less money. So what we have also in the feminization of teachers as females, we have the ability to give them lower wages. But when we look at Black African American female teachers, we see that they even got a rawer deal, a worse deal than white female teachers, because that we had racism and gender discrimination involved, right? So a lot of times in the early history of teaching for Black teachers is that they didn't have any kind of firm stance. They had no protections in terms of their jobs. They were on perpetual probationary status, which means, you there's no negotiation. You just you take what you can get. And even though the wages were low and risky for Black teachers, and they were low for white teachers, it still was kind of better than what was out there, right? Because that gave women, for the first time for a lot of women, the chance to be a little bit more financially independent, and that they didn't necessarily go off and seek marriage right away for their stability, that maybe they had a few more choices. So women in the workforce, of course, was an issue all over the place in terms of availability for teachers. And once we started getting going with public schooling, the standards or the environment for teachers was pretty amazing. I mean, in this picture, you look at, they're just packed in. So a 1-to-60 ratio for kids in one room schoolhouses, meaning that you had all sorts of different grade levels, that you had to do everything in terms of cleaning the classroom, making the fires, doing all the stuff. There were so many restrictions as to what you were able to do as a teacher in your community, the length of your skirt, if you're being escorted by a man, if you're out during certain hours. So many constraints, but it didn't matter for a lot of women because it was a chance, again, to take on a hard job with lots of restrictions, but gave them the idea that they could move into a career and have a little bit of autonomy. So that's kind of what was happening. There wasn't a lot of bonuses to be a teacher. If you got pregnant, then you were dismissed because you kind of had to have that pure sort of vibe that women are supposed to have as role models and continue to have, right? So that is for sure. But what kind of happened after, again, women got together and were able to kind of talk more about their work situations as they did in the factories, and we got some union organization going. Then we had teachers, more than a lot of occupations, female teachers, really starting to agitate for all sorts of stuff, for better working conditions, for higher salaries, for better conditions for their students. And that has been a really ongoing, wonderful thing that teachers have done from way back in the day, when they're saying, okay, you need to give us some rights. And we also want to protect the rights of the children that we're trying to teach as well, in terms of providing their appropriate materials and the infrastructure, the space, and really importantly, providing equitable education, right? So the whole civil rights movement was doing all sorts of things in terms of demanding equity for Black folks and people of color, but it was also talking about integrating the school districts, the schools themselves, in that. That wasn't happening. And I'm getting a little sidetracked because I'm reading right now Bettina Love's, where are you? Somewhere in my pile of books, How to Be an Abolitionist Teacher, and then I've been reading a couple other things. So here I thought, oh yeah, integrating the schools, Brown versus the Board of Education. Ruby, what is it? Ruby, what's it? Ruby Bridges, who was the first little Black girl that gets into the classrooms and integrates, and she's in the classroom by herself because the white parents won't let their kids in, and she's taught the whole year almost by a teacher all alone. But then now I'm reading things just lately, just in the last couple of months, as I continue my own education, in the fact that that a lot of Black students mourn when this whole integration thing came about, because they lost their powerful Black teachers and the community that they had, and they were integrated into white schools, and where racism was even like 10,000 times worse. So I don't know, that's interesting, just looking at this slide. Excuse my digression, but the idea that we're fighting for equity and for rights, and we need to really question how that really benefits some students. But nonetheless, it certainly benefited some in the fact that they got textbooks, and they got some of the things that white students just got without question. But it's a sad thing that I consider that so many students of that time are saying that that's when they learned to have Black pride, before desegregation. So I'm saddened by that. But again, one thing that teachers have done throughout their participation in this career, what is to be activists and to fight for more pay, for more rights for themselves as well as for their students, for sure. So that is an amazing thing, and something I want to highlight. The union. So this is the Chicago Teachers Union, and they fought for all sorts of rights. They have over the decades, and fairly recently they fought for the right of teachers not to have to be shoved back into classrooms before we knew what was going on with COVID. They were the only district last year that said, we're not going back to live classes until you give us a little more information, or it was, and it's this year as well. So some really powerful female teachers have come out of this whole chain of events in terms of having so little of a voice back in the 1800s, when they kind of were just kind of shoved into those jobs, and taking those jobs that were miserable in pay and expectations, and they were so constrained, and moving forward to really be huge voices for their communities and for their students. So insane, really, right? And but the deal is that so many teachers are dropping out of teaching for all sorts of reasons. That definitely the whole COVID thing has really got them slammed in terms of the stress level of their students, of students not being in an infrastructure where they're getting what they need in terms of just basic meals or supplies. And so we keep seeing the fallout, literally, of teachers recently, and we have for years and years in terms of pay. I have one, I think that I have it in here, but I'll get a video that just talks in some areas where teachers have two jobs. They leave their teacher job and they go to another one because they can't afford to live on one salary, the teaching salary. In Oklahoma, that there was a teachers strike. I think it was last year. Oh yeah, this is the one I need to show you. I'll post that and saying, yeah, I'm part of why I'm striking is because look I have 87 students and 29 textbooks. Like, what gives, right? So lots of strong political voices now in the teachers field. So they're maybe not that soft, gentle presence that got them into the field in the first place. But then again, this is the one I need. I'm going to get both of these links for you. So this is the one about, like, I have a master's degree, all this experience in working extra jobs. I mean, working like as vet assistants. I mean, it's just crazy. So on the coast, the teacher's pay is higher. Up in here, my sister, who's the kindergarten teacher, she has after 20 years, she has a pretty decent salary. But that's not how it is in middle America by any means. So women are having to female teachers are having to do more than one job often. And so that's what I like to just end this with, the idea that even though unions have helped fight, and unions here even at Sac State have helped fight for teachers, for me fairly recently, some pretty good deals as a adjunct lecturer with not having the rights that the tenured and the tenure track teachers, the ones that have more protection. So some unions have done some great work for other teachers at Sac State as well. But it brings me back to the idea that women are, more disposable than men, are less valued in their occupational choices, and are kind of dumped on a lot. And it certainly happens in this field as well. But just kind of wanted to give you just a quick glimpse of teaching in the United States of America. So thanks for listening to this.